Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 17, Part 2. A deep shudder passed through me as I fell back to my haunches, heaving deep breaths to calm myself. My legs trembled, and to my side, I caught Starlight's wide-eyed expression, and she silently mouthed, "Wow." I lowered my head to my hooves, eyes closed as I calmed down, letting the adrenaline burn away. The pyre was almost burnt out by the time I stood again. Starlight was sitting nearby, looking awkward. Dusty was picking through the abandoned weapons, a couple of magical energy rifles poking out from under the flap of his saddlebags, and across the room, Sickle stood in the shadows, leaning against a wall. I took my time recovering my equipment, strapping on bags, slinging my rifle, and donning my cloak once more. By the time I'd finished, the last of the jitteriness had passed.
"Okay,"
I said, drawing every pony's attention.
"Time to move on."
I started to move to the back of the room, and the door's there, but hesitated at the giant crystal. I stared at the heart, dark and empty. Only a moment of consideration passed before I lowered my head, touching the tip of my horn to the crystal and called up my magic. It was only a tiny amount, but it was enough to bring out a gentle glow from the depths of the crystal. I caught Starlight's questioning look when I stepped back.
"I couldn't just leave it dark like that."
She gave a little nod. I led us to one of the doors in the back of the throne room. Like the main doors, most of them were barricaded with remains of chairs and benches. Dusty's attention was immediately drawn to the center door, which did not. "Why'd they barricade these, but not that one?"
"That leads to the Queen's chambers,"
I said, as I helped Starlight carry away one of the benches.
"There's no other entrance."
"So, they were keeping it safe?"
"I assume so."
He nodded. "Did you want to check it out?" I froze, almost dropping my end of the bench.
"Yes. No."
We finished removing the crude barricade and passed through, entering an access hall that led into the depths of the Hive's administration center. As we walked down the hall, Sickle stepped up beside me. I resisted the urge to shrink away, especially when her head turned to stare at me.
"So, armor, huh?" "Yes,"
I said in a perfectly neutral tone. She nodded, then her hoof lifted and struck my side, giving a powerful shove. I slammed into the wall, my head cracking against the stone. The impact knocked my breath out, and I staggered for a couple steps before regaining my balance. Starlight shouted, but Sickle ignored her. She continued to stare at me, her expression impossible to read behind that helmet of hers.
"It any good?"
I glared up at her.
"Yes,"
I said, with a clear edge to my voice. Despite getting the winds knocked out of me, my unexpected encounter with the wall hadn't actually hurt. Sickle bared her teeth in a grin.
"Good,"
she said, and turned to look ahead of her again. I continued to glare for several seconds as we continued on. You'd think being able to feel certain emotions might make it easier to understand ponies, but the fact that she had held some small level of positive feeling for me throughout the encounter just made things more confusing. Fortunately, there were no more unexpected armor checks along the way. We made it to the main stairway and headed down. We encountered only a single ghoul along the way, apparently trapped in the stairway. 5 levels down, I led us out. The halls there were much less impressive than the large public spaces from before, but they were still of comfortable size and cleanly cut into the rock. It had also apparently been abandoned. There were no bodies, reanimated or not. Finally, we reached the doorway I was looking for. I stopped before it, huffing out a short sigh, and whispered quietly to myself,
"Please, let things be simple. Just this once."
Dusty shot me a questioning look, but I just shook my head, pushed open the door, and stepped through. As Starlight's light flowed over the room, my ears and wings drooped at my side. Past the technician stations, a broad window looked on into the server room, and the mangled lumps of metal and gemstones within. Dusty muttered a curse under his breath, while Starlight trotted up to the window, lifting our pip-buck as she peered around the server room.
"It's all trashed. What happened? Pharaohs don't normally care about property damage." "Security protocols,"
I said, sitting down heavily to lean back against one of the technician's desks.
"The server's databanks get wiped. Matrix disruption grenades are used to wipe any remaining information and collapse the spell matrices, and thermite charges destroy the hardware. It's information security, in case the hive is lost. I'd hope that they hadn't decided to just do this.
Dusty cursed again. So, we get nothing?
Not here,
I said. I leaned my head back to thump against the desk. I repeated that a few times before grunting and forcing myself back up to my hooves.
But not all information is digital, or stored on the servers. We should go to the command center.
Where's that? He asked.
4 levels up,
I replied.
But first...
I turned to the technician stations and started searching around. The results were swift and bountiful, and within a couple of minutes, I had acquired an extensive toolkit from computer and electronical work. A smaller, more portable kit, various cables, 6 data stores including one labeled software toolkit, and a pair of portable terminals that put my much larger one to shame. In the process of gathering them up, I also noticed that the emergency destructive devices locker still had contents, and we gathered them up, as well as 4 matrix disruption grenades and a pair of thermite charges. I had no idea if they'd ever be useful, but I took them all the same. Once those were all tucked away, we headed up. The command center occupied the entire level it was on. The 2 stairwells connected to the ends of a single hallway, and in the middle of that hallway was the entrance to the command center, flanked by fortified security positions. As expected, the door was locked. This posed a problem, as there was no way Sickle was bucking that door down. It was a heavy blast door, a foot thick. On top of that, the locks were electronically powered and required a constant supply of power to remain unlocked. As soon as she heard that, Starlight went to work. After knocking around on the frame of the door, she brought out her cutter. We all retreated around the corner, waiting in the darkness as the sharp, powerful light flashed and danced. Her first exploratory cut opens just enough of the doorframe to peer inside the machinery and wiring there, and gave her a better idea where to cut. The second cut, lasting for a couple of minutes, opened a foot-tall hole. Then, it was a matter of digging at the internals and trying to get them to work. It was a good half hour of work before she hooked up a spark battery to a couple of cables, and with a muffled buzz, the machinery spun to life.
Come on,
She muttered to herself, eyeing up inside the hole she had made. I could just make out the edge of some cylinder drawing away from the door, then with a loud thump, the cylinder stopped and the door lurched.
Yes! Open it!
Sickle stepped forward and shoved. Some mechanism squealed and ground in protest as the foot-thick door slowly swung open. Starlight removed the spark battery, and the machinery produced a final thump as the buzz ceased and repacked her tools. The door thumped heavily against its stops, and with a sudden shriek, an armored ghoul dropped onto Sickle's back. Both Starlight and Dusty's weapons snapped up, but neither fired as Sickle spun around. The ghoul flailed and bit uselessly at her armored back until one spin sent it off balance and lost its grip. Sickle lashed out with both hind legs, smashing the ghoul against the open door with a sickening crunch. More ghouls came, and Sickle charged forward to meet them. We followed behind her, stepping through the doorway and into the entry gallery. Blue lines cut through the air, taking down one of the 3 ghouls rushing towards us, while Sickle met their charge with her own, smashing both of them against the low wall of the gallery. Their struggles ended moments later. We scanned around, weapons sweeping over the room. The entire gallery overlooked the central operations room, a large space with dozens of desks with terminals, all facing the trio of large projector screens. To the sides, hallways on both the main room's level and our own led to the specialized offices, with chipped and faded lines of color leading the way to different sections. While I could see several bodies, there were no more ghouls. Sickle took a step, wobbled, and toppled over on her side. There was an assortment of startled replies as we rushed over to her side, but she was already getting back on her hooves. Dusty was the closest to her head, though he gave the sharp horn a wide berth. "You okay there?"
I'm fine,
she muttered.
I just tripped.
Uh-huh, Dusty replied, frowning.
Fuck off,
she replied a little louder.
I got ghoul gunk everywhere. It's slippery. Fucking ass.
Dusty frowned, but didn't press the matter. With that more or less settled for the moment, I turned to the emergency supply cabinet beside the door. To my surprise, it was open and empty, except for some filter cases and spare batteries. I turned back to the first changeling ghoul, clad in the same kind of armor I'd just acquired. Sure enough, she wore a respirator mask, one of the supplies missing from the cabinet. She also wore a bandolier of pouches, carrying replacement spark packs for a magical energy weapon that was nowhere to be seen. Hanging from that bandolier was the item I had originally hoped to find in the cabinet, a flashlight. I unclipped it, then turned and held it out to Dusty.
There's a blue line on the wall in the hallway to our right. You and Tick will follow it. It'll lead you to the computer security department and the backup server. I expect they'll have destroyed it as well, but it's worth a check.
Dusty accepted the flashlight with a nod.
Starlight and I will be down in the pit,
I said, inclining my head towards the main chamber. We parted ways, and I headed down the ramp to the main floor of the room. I headed straight to the rearmost desk, elevated to look over the stations in front of it. I figured, if there was important information to be found, Ops Lead was the place to start. All the desks were covered with various folders and papers, as well as a thick layer of dust. Another body lay behind the desk. A respirator mask was strapped to her face, connected by a short hose to a bottle hung around her neck. Even past the centuries of decay, I could recognize Vigilance. This was... had been her domain. I tore my view away from her, throat tightening a bit. We hadn't been close, or even spoke much, but this was a face I recognized. Instead, I turned to her desk. I pressed the power button on her terminal, just in case, and when it produced no results, I looked to the papers lying on the desk.
You need that on?
Starlight asked, already prying at the back panel of the terminal with a hoof.
It would help,
I said.
Can you do that?
She chuckled, floating out her compact electronics kit.
Oh yeah. I've done this a lot. It's surprising how much stuff is tucked away behind the terminal-operated locks. Powering stuff up is a useful skill for scavengers.
The back panel came off with a soft pop, and she got to work.
And you guys even use the same Stapletech terminals everyone else uses.
She retrieved a spark battery from her bags, and after half a minute of tweaking and rewiring, leaned over the computer and stabbed a hoof at the power button. The terminal hummed and chirped as it sprang to life, the screen flickering awake with a soft green glow. A few seconds later, it finished booting up, and the screen displayed a login prompt. It was my turn to get to work. I retrieved one of the new, smaller portable terminals and turned it on. It sprang to life without complaint. To my satisfaction, I found that it had all the software tools I would need, and quite a few my older terminal had lacked. A few moments of digging produced the right debug cable from my bags, and I plugged it into the exposed port inside the open back panel and rebooted Vigilance's terminal. This time, text representations of all the spell processes scrolled down the screen of the portable terminal. It was trivially easy to halt the spell matrix at the right point and convince it that yes, I had entered a correct login. There was very limited information stored locally. I started skimming through entries, which were mostly scheduling, along with a few back and forth messages about a game night. Starlight sat next to me, reading the messages that popped up. Then I found a message log. It only had 15 messages, but from the header, I could see that they were all priority messages sent from the ops lead to Queen Ephema and her assistants during the final day of the Hive's life. We read the entries together.
0832. Infop reports assess Manhattan 3138 has gone off task for a priority investigation of 4-star central offices. Multiple work teams dispatched without announced work orders. Site on elevated security with activation of lethal measures. Zebra contacts in 4 stars may be higher placed than initially believed. Asset Manhattan 1284 reports elevated mom traffic and arrival of Steel Ranger detachment. Believes mom is preparing a major raid. Info prioritization infiltration of 4 stars to investigate possible mid to high level threat. 0955, Nightfall. Infop reports assess Cantrelot 6916 had discovered a 4 stars work Skywagon parked near the castle. Presence in Cantrelot is unexplained. Vehicle abandoned, no occupants or cargo. Possible zebra ties concerning. Asset Cantrelot 6916 tasked with immediate investigation. Broken mask. Infop declaring all further 4 stars traffic as Nightfall. What does any of that mean?
Starlight asked.
The, Infop and the like? Infop is infiltration operations,
I said.
Basically, my boss's boss. They're in charge of all espionage operations. Broken Mask means the task is top priority, and is to be pursued as aggressively as possible, even if that means the infiltrator has to burn an alias or expose themselves. And Nightfall, that's bad. It's one of the reporting keywords to indicate the severity of the message contents.
I glanced at the next entry and hesitated before adding,
In fact, there's only one keyword that's more severe. 1101, Eclipse. SIGINT reports abrupt increase in communications traffic in Zebra Strategic Defenses Network. Decryption pending. Possibility of lead up to large-scale offensive actions. Eclipse, Eclipse, Eclipse. 1113, Eclipse. SIGINT reports traffic indicating full activation of Zebra strategic assets. Op lead suggests enacting Cocoon Protocol. 1116, Eclipse. Infop reports inability to contact Zebra assets. No contacts made in past 4 hours. All assets presumed lost or ineffective. Assume large-scale strategic or megaspell attack imminent. Request permission to declare breakout for all assets globally. And what does... breakout was the commands I got on the day the megaspells hit,
I said, suppressing a shiver.
Drop everything and run away as fast as you can. It usually means the mom is about to bust down your door. Not...
Starlight slowly nodded.
And Cocoon? That one's new to me. 1118, Eclipse. Staging begun for Cocoon Protocol. Recommend Queen departs immediately for Cocoon Site 4. Breakout commands issued to all infiltrators. Further instructions added when possible to comply with Cocoon. 1122, Eclipse. Op lead acknowledges, wishes best speed to Queen. Command is remaining in place to continue operations. Will continue to update on situation. 1135, Eclipse. All section leads report large-scale conventional missile attack on Canterlot. Citywide shield is holding against attack. Local army mobilized to evacuate nearby civilian population. 1200, Eclipse. Unconfirmed report of megaspell detonation. Vicinity, Cloudsdale. 1202, Eclipse. SIGINT intercepted Equestrian Pinnacle. Spell flash traffic confirming megaspell detonation in Cloudsdale. 1213, Eclipse. Further megaspell detonations confirmed in Manhattan, Philadelphia, and Maripony. More unconfirmed reports coming in. SIGINT reports Zebra strategic communications are significantly degraded, but indicate retaliatory megaspell strikes. 1215, Eclipse. Unknown megaspell event reported inside Canterlot Shield. Shield holding. 1221, Eclipse. Current count, 83 megaspell detonations confirmed. More underway. SIGINT reports complete breakdown of both Equestrian and Zebra strategic communications. 1225, Eclipse. Hive under attack. Megaspell detonation in close proximity. Hive intact. Damage assessment underway. 1238, Eclipse. Balefire ingested by ventilation systems. Radiation levels rising to rapidly lethal levels throughout the hive. Oxygen levels critical, declaring the hive lost. Enacting information security protocols in lockdown. Evacuation underway. Commands remaining in place to coordinate while secondary air supplies hold out. To anyling receiving this message, the hive lives on in you. Good luck.
I didn't realize I was trembling until Starlight's foreleg closed around my shoulders. I gave a weak, shuddering sigh, leaned my head gently against hers, and closed my eyes. Hoofsteps drew closer, echoing strangely in the irregular room before halting a short distance away. "You found something," Dusty said, and it wasn't a question. I took a deep breath, slowly sitting more upright as I opened my eyes, looking to him. He stood a short distance away, the flashlight in his mouth pointed at the ground. Beside him, Sickle was already moving to gather the bodies.
Messages,
I said, and weakly motioned a hoof at the terminal.
Sent while the hive was dying. And that cocoon stuff?
Starlight said, giving me a gentle squeeze.
That could be good. If that place you woke up was the 4th cocoon site, that means there's at least 3 more places where some changelings might have survived. Maybe more. Maybe less,
I said, looking down at my hooves.
It was common practice with sensitive data to start numbering at something other than 1.
Anyway, Dusty said, you were right. We found the server you told us about, but it's toast. What else should we look for? I looked up again, eyes glancing over the various desks.
Well, anything referencing something called a Cocoon Protocol. It seems likely that's the name for what the Hive was doing with CLT.
He went to one of the desks and started leafing through the papers. Starlight looked at me, worry in her eyes, but she gave me a soft smile. I managed to return it. After giving me another squeeze, she moved to another desk to do the same. I remained sitting there for a couple more seconds before forcing myself to stand. Another flashlight lay beside Vigilance. I retrieved it, suppressing another tremble, and set it into another desk worth of papers. Sickle grunted as she dropped another couple of bodies into the growing pile. She was panting just a little as she turned away.
Shit, you got one huge fucking family, you know that?
Off to my side, Starlight was glaring daggers at her. As for myself, I wavered on exactly how to reply to that. Eventually, I sighed and quietly murmured,
It's a lot smaller now.
Sickle gave a single chuckle before going silent again. After a moment, she turned and resumed gathering bodies. I wasn't surprised when our search turned up no more references to Cocoon. Information security was a serious concern, even in the hive itself. The dead were all gathered by the time we had finished, with Sickle sitting back against the wall beside the pile. My throat tightened as I looked over them. There must have been 40 or 50 changelings there. Vigilance lay along the side of the heap, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Dusty finished removing another respirator mask from one of the dead, adding it to the 3 he had already acquired. Another flashlight was given to Sickle, who dismissively tossed it into her bags. Then, it was time for me to do my thing. I focused my magic, and soon another funeral pyre was roaring. The green flames burned away the dead. I silently led the way out, my pace lethargic. We were leaving the command center when Starlight spoke up. Her voice was quiet and surprisingly timid.
Whisper?
I looked back over my shoulder. Her ears hung low as she tried to speak, starting and stopping several times before quietly asking,
What did you say the symptoms of, overfeeding were?
My gaze fell to the floor again.
Fatigue, headaches, dizziness or disorientation, magical exhaustion, and emotional suppression. Yeah,
She said, slowly nodding.
I think you might need to, go easy on the magic.
I nodded dully. Then Dusty added, I'm kinda feeling it too,
Sorry.
I said. A moment later, his words fully processed. My head came up, turning to him.
Wait, you too? I wasn't...
I hesitated again. There was a small amount of affection, or perhaps compassion, coming from him.
I mean, I don't think I was feeding on you. Unless I did it without realizing it. This place is fucking with our heads.
Sickle growled from my other side, and I looked over to see her flicking her tail in agitation.
Like, this place ain't right.
She glanced my way.
'Cause, yeah, I'm feeling it too.
I slowly nodded.
I'll be careful. We're pretty much done.
Dusty nodded. Where else are we going? Emotions warred inside me, but I spoke evenly.
Queen Ephemus Chambers. It's the last place I can think of that's likely to have any relevant information for us.
No pony said anything in reply, and we continued on. I led us silently back to the throne room, and then to the unbarricaded set of double doors. Broad stairways led us up a wide landing, with another set of ornate double doors at the end. The lock broke with a loud crack as Sickle bucked the doors open. We moved in, pip-buck lights and flashlights illuminating the rooms as we went. The whole area had a sense of grandness to it. It was built to the scale of a changeling queen, and the hive had ensured that she had the most comfortable of living arrangements. There was the grand entry chamber, ringed by a balcony above. A large office served as a workplace for both Queen Ephema and her assistants. Another huge room, larger even than her entry chamber, had numerous cushions and couches, with a few low tables. It was an ideal place to hold relaxed meetings. There was also a dining area, with a large table that could seat a few dozen changelings. And then, there were the more personal chambers, such as a sizable bathroom and, of course, her bedroom chamber. I'd seen the more public portion of her chambers, but I'd never been in these private areas. I had to force myself to continue walking. I felt like an intruder. A trespasser. It was a feeling both intimately familiar and alarmingly discomforting. I was able to take some small comfort that Ephema would surely not object to my intrusion. I was, after all, here to fulfill the mission she had entrusted in me. I led the way through the rooms, my pace slow as I looked around. I could feel the tears slowly running down my cheeks, but I continued on, pretending that they weren't there. The bedroom. That was the hardest part. There were several displays to hold the small number of necklaces and other jewelry that she owned. They were mostly gifts from changelings returning from missions in other lands. The shelves set on the back wall contained an assortment of artistic works that had been given to her, but mostly my eyes lingered on the huge bed, long vacant and lightly coated in dust. I swallowed a few times as we moved back to the offices and felt confident enough to speak by the time we got there. As we neared the large desk, I raised the hoof to gesture.
Starlight?
She moved forward quickly, stepping up behind the terminal atop the desk. It took less than a minute, which I spent in a fruitless search through the desk's single drawer, before the terminal flickered and were to life. With the servers down, there was practically nothing to find. The local cache contained only a single file, a local copy of the last message the terminal had sent.
Thank you for your concern, Solstice, but I must fly on my own power. My children are already sacrificing so much for their sisters, and myself. We are being forced to leave far too many behind. It breaks my heart to know that, should the worst come to pass, I will never again see the many who remain here. Yet I'm filled with pride for the bravery and resolve for all of my children, as they offer their own lives and heads held high to ensure a future for us. I should do no less. I understand the flight will be exhausting, but it's a small price to pay to ask me compared to the sacrifices others have made. More importantly, the Skywagons can carry a dozen eggs in the space I would occupy. I will not leave a single one behind, even if I have to carry them myself. They deserve to see the future that their sister's sacrifice had brought them. Please, load the Skywagons and send them on their way the moment the eggs are secure. Tell them I shall depart shortly and don't let them wait for me. Have them fly without delay and take the eggs to safety as swiftly as they can. I'll be speaking to the Hive in a few moments, to those who are remaining behind. Vigilance is worried about the security issues if this turns out to be a false alarm, but I can't leave without saying goodbye, expressing my shame in leaving, and offering my thanks for everything you have all given. Whatever the future our Hive may be, I hope we can live up to your example. Thank you, Solace, for all you have done. Goodbye.
I shakily raised the hoof, pressing the terminal's power switch. The screen flickered and died, the soft hum from within slowly winding down. I sniffled, blinking tears from my eyes. Starlight was beside me again, squeezing gently with a foreleg, her eyes watering up. It was several seconds before I was able to speak past the lump in my throat, my voice barely above a whisper.
That's it then. Sorry.
Starlight quietly murmured beside me, and I gave a deep, shuddering sigh. I leaned against her. At least we know there were other sites, Dusty said. When I looked up at him, blinking away tears, he added, There weren't any eggs. I slowly nodded.
Yeah. There weren't.
Starlight gave another squeeze and a cautious smile, despite the thin trail of tears that had run down her cheeks. Dusty stepped over, sitting on my other side. So, hey, I know it isn't quite as neat and simple as if we had a map telling us right where to go, but, well, I'd be glad to help you look for them.
Me too,
Starlight said, full of determination. Sickle merely grunted.
Thanks,
I murmured, then raised the hoof to wipe at my eyes. A few seconds later, I spoke again, a little more surely.
Though, I can at least make sure that we don't leave empty-hooved.
I looked up to Dusty's questioning expression and blinked away the last of the tears.
I know where the armory is.
We stepped out through the giant blast door, the last funeral pyre rapidly burning down behind us. My head throbbed, and my magical reserves were nearly depleted. My body felt exhausted. I knew I shouldn't have felt so drained, but it didn't matter. Love starvation was no longer a concern with 3 ponies keeping me fed. Then again, those 3 ponies looked as weary as I felt. The trip through the hive had been more draining than any of us had expected. As I walked over to the control panel, Starlight walked beside me, her bags bulging. The muzzles of several weapons, both kinetic and magical, protruded from under the flaps.
"You're sure about us taking all of this stuff?"
She asked. She'd been hovering close to my side the whole time, watching me in concern.
I mean, I know that's a little stupid coming from the experienced scavenger, but, well, it's your hive.
I had to admit, it did feel a little wrong, like digging up a grave just to rob it for some trinkets. Despite that, I nodded.
Any changeling would give everything they had to help the hive. I think they'd be happy to know that these went to find their sisters, instead of just lying there, unused.
She slowly smiled and nodded.
That's a really nice way of looking at it,
she said. I nodded a little. My mind slowly unwound as I reached the door panel. She stepped up beside me. It was around then that I noticed her limp. Starlight must have noticed my glance towards her leg. Given my downcast expression at the time, I suppose my concern must have been obvious.
It's just a little sore again,
she said, giving a casual shrug for emphasis.
I'm more concerned about you, to be honest. How are you holding up?
I stood silently for several seconds. The only response I could come up with was to just shrug. Finally, I reached out, pressing the big red button. A thump sounded from behind us, followed by a short screech, as the giant doors started to move once more. I looked over my shoulder, watching as the multi-ton slab of steel slowly rolled into place. The flickering green glow emanated from beyond steadily, narrowed and faded. I drew in a deep breath and let out a long, soft sigh. Then I spoke, my voice quiet and almost lost behind the grind of machinery.
The hive lives on in me.
The blast door shut with a deep thud. The muffled sounds of machinery winding down. I turned back to Starlight. Her expression was concerned again until I smiled. It was a small, weak smile, as if it struggled against everything I had just experienced. But it held. As she smiled back, I gave a little nod. I turned again, looking ahead as we started to walk.
I've got a lot of work ahead of me.
That was quite the intense quest. My god. Anyway, I'd like to give a very special thank you to my epic donators. Yoshi Super Saiyan 2, Peter Coulthard, Nicholas Springthorpe, Dospo, Rainbow Dash 1990, Runescythe 9852, Dresdon, David D. Sanchez, Dwight Cornel, Gagi, Secret Moon, Orient Pax Kaiju, Starlight Glimmer, Trey, Pokekiller Zach, Soul Dragon, Dak Britton, Joe Pierce E, and Reno. Thank you all very much for watching this video, and I will see you all in the next one.